Breakfast Club had Nikki Haley on, and here are my 5 takeaways from the interview. Mind you, these are my takeaways. I watched the interview from beginning to end. You're welcome. This is pretty much the 5 takeaways that I have. Before we even dive in, I just want to say I was right the whole time. Based off of this interview, it pretty much confirmed what I've been saying about Nikki Haley and how she pretty much is someone you cannot trust. I do give credit when credit is due. I said quit it. I do give credit when credit is due. She is someone who can talk very, very well, express her points very, very well. She presents herself very professional and so forth, but she's still a politician. You can't really trust her. In Nikki Haley's famous words, it ain't personal, it's just who she is as a public political figure is what I'm judging her based off of. And I just know you can't trust that lady. First point out of the interview, that woman was dodging. She was dodging left, right. And she couldn't answer a question straight on.
When you look at the inequalities in America, in education, home ownership, employment and wealth, healthcare, can you admit that America is systemically and structurally a racist country?
I think culture has a lot to do with it, right? But it's more of, if you look at that, how do you fix it?
Right? Even when you say all men are created equal, no, they weren't, because we were labeled 3/5 of a human. Black people were.
Right, and we made that wrong right. Mm-hmm. And we've got some more rights we have to do. But this is...
So systemically and structurally, do you think America is racist? Not the people, not everybody in America.
I don't think America's racist. I think we have racism in America, and I think we have cultural issues. But let me explain where I am. So first of all, I grew up, and you might have, I don't know if Berkeley County was like this, in a town of 2,500 two stoplights. We were the only Indian family in that small southern town. We weren't white enough to be white. We weren't black enough to be black. Mm-hmm. They didn't know who we were, what we were, or why we were there. In that rural town, we didn't know what we didn't have. And so people just survived.
So like that was a slap in the face with Tim Scott? Because you did appoint him. Did you feel like that was a slap in the face? And the fact that he loves Donald Trump and wants to tongue kiss him, did you feel like that was a slap in the face?
People have to deal with their decisions. He's going to have to sleep with that one.
Damn. How did you feel when you saw him say, I love you, to Donald Trump in that way?
He's going to have to sleep with that one.
Not sleep with him, but like...
That goes back to the main point of me saying that she's a really good politician. That's what politicians do. But in this interview, it was so bad. He was just dodging. And I truly believe the Breakfast Club was actually being easy on her. They were harder on Vivek Ramaswamy than they were on her. Like, they were really, really easy on her. Obviously, in hindsight, we would want someone like Tez in there to like hold her feet to the fire or whatever the case may be. Second point, she lacks a foundation. With Nikki Haley, her political views, it's like a seesaw. It goes back and forth, back and forth.
I got a few more questions because you're giving us a lot of time. Thank you. Would you use force against Texas if they tried to secede over the border issue? Because I remember in 2010 you said U.S. states should have the right to secede. Do you still believe that?
I believe in states' rights. Okay. I believe that everything should be as close to the people to decide. Mm-hmm. We know that's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. That's not the issue. But I do think, like right now, it's a good issue on states' rights. Biden won't secure the border. Mm-hmm. If Governor Abbott goes and puts that fencing up there to keep people out, he has to protect Texans. When I was governor, I had to protect South Carolinians. You do whatever it takes to protect your people and keep them safe. Mm-hmm. If Biden's saying, no, cut that fence, I mean, a state has the ability to do these things because states' rights do matter. Mm-hmm. And I think that states need to be able to do that.
Would you use force against Texas if they ever try to secede?
Use force against them?
Yeah.
No, we don't ever use force against our own Americans.
Okay. I guess I don't mean like military or anything like that. I'm just talking about like, would you be strong against them doing that?
I mean, I think, states are going to make decisions, but let's talk about what's reality. Mm-hmm. Texas isn't going to secede. I mean, that's not something that they're going to do.
So why did you say you believe in that in 2010?
What was the context of it?
I think you said you believe that states have the right to secede. That's what you said.
Do you believe that the states of the United States have the right to secede from the Union?
I think that they do. I mean, the Constitution says that.
I think states have the right to make the decisions that their people want to make. Mm-hmm. I mean, they do. In South Carolina, we said we didn't want Syrian refugees. We said we didn't want Guantanamo Bay prisoners. We said those things. I do think that laws should be made as close to the people as possible because it empowers the people. If Texas decides they want to do that, they can do that. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that if that whole state says we don't want to be part of America anymore, I mean, that's their decision to make. But I don't think government needs to tell people how to live, how to do anything. I mean, I think that we need to let freedom live.
And, I want to go back to the flag. Do you still think Confederate Heritage Month should be celebrated? You said that in 2010 as well.
So right after the flag came down, a lot of people wanted to remove monuments and street signs. And, South Carolina is draped in history. And what I said then and what I still say now is taking down a monument, taking down something doesn't change the situation. Add to it. So instead of taking down a monument, they're putting up a memorial for Mother Emanuel. There's an African-American museum now right there in Charleston. add to the history. Don't erase history, because that's what teaches us lessons. If the South Carolina General Assembly wants to continue having a Confederate, whatever it is they have, they vote on that. They decide whether to do that. That's up to them. I did my part. My part was saying we're not going to have a living, breathing symbol stand in front of our state house anymore and define us, and brought that down. We all have choices to make. The legislature, if they choose to do that, they can choose to do that. I mean, I remember right when I asked for the flag to come down, there was one day we had the Black Panthers on one side of the state house and we had the KKK on the other side. That each of them, that was their choice. I made sure there was enough security that no one got hurt. Freedom does matter. I will always fight for people's freedom. I will never sit there and say what you can say and not say. I'll never tell you how to live or not live. I'll never control your life and say government's going to tell you to do this. I strongly believe that that people need to live and say and do what they want to do. I may not agree with it, but I will always fight for your freedom.
And in 2010, you also said about this. Well, you said it in an interview too that it was about tradition versus change. And then they asked you about it earlier this year, and you said it wasn't about slavery, but then you came back and said it was. Why initially didn't you just say, hey, it was about slavery? What happened there?
So the context of that is I've done over 100
Depending on who she's around or what room she's sitting in, that kind of determines what her thoughts and beliefs are. And it was almost like she had an excuse for reasons why she's very wishy-washy. She would say things like, oh, it depends on the context, or I didn't say that, or whatever the case may be. It was very much like you don't have a foundation. And that's one of the most dangerous things we can do in this country, is giving power to someone who has no backbone, someone who just doesn't know how to think for themselves. Nikki Haley, I just truly believe she lacks that backbone, and this interview kind of exposed that. Third point kind of ties into the first two. Like, she just simply couldn't give definite answers. Like, when someone asks you if the country is racist, it's just a yes or no question. Like, you don't have to overcompensate and over-explain, because when you do that, it really rubs people off the wrong way.
Talk about your policies and some of the policies and the things that you stand on. You also said that you felt like Biden was been, I guess, Obama 2.0. What didn't you like about the Obama administration that you would have changed immediately? Like, what were you against?
There were
and you said something about Kamala. I want to ask why you said if Kamala was president, why would send chills down your spine?
So a couple of things. I think with Obama, that was, if you go back, that's when we really started to feel the division. That's when it was.
A lot of that was because of white supremacists, though.
Well, no, I think it was everything. Everything was exaggerated with the Obama administration. It became more about gender. It became more about race. It became more about separating Americans instead of bringing them together.
That was because of right-wing media, though. Well, they were scared to death of a black president.
Look, I don't think everybody is at fault. I'm not saying that one person did this, but I'm saying under that administration, it really did cause some. You just people felt like they were being put in camps through that administration. The second thing is, I saw he was very much an Iranian sympathizer. He very much kept wanting to support and do things with Iran. I think that's incredibly dangerous. This is a culture that says death to America, and you have to always be careful. A lot of spending happened on his watch that started us down that spiral. And then Obama did a lot of things by executive order. And that really started he did a lot by executive order. Then Trump came in and reversed it all by executive order. Then Biden went and reversed it all there. You've got to do it the hard way. You got to get Congress to come together and do those things, because that makes it permanent. So what that did is that created leaders from around the world saw you just wait out a president. But more than that, people got used to just quick fixes instead of coming together and doing the hard work. So it was more about, what do we need to do to move us forward in a way that we're lifting up everybody, not a select few. That's when I started to see it. Kamala, it's from an experience standpoint. I mean, she's never been a governor. She's never had executive experience. She was a senator for a couple of years, but the things that Biden gave her, she didn't do anything with them. The border, she didn't do anything. I've spent more time at the border than she spent at the border. When it came to artificial intelligence, he gave her that. She didn't do anything with it. America's behind everybody else when it comes to artificial intelligence. I just haven't seen her do anything. She went to overseas. He sent her to a foreign policy conference. She should have been talking about how we were going to have more allies with Philippines and India and South Korea and Japan and all that. She didn't say anything, and China just had their way with that conversation. It's not about her personally. It's about the fact that we are looking at a dangerous time in our country. This is not the time to go and put somebody in there and say, oh, we're going to do this because. You do it because we've got to get the right person in there, and stop with the labels and stop with the division and stop with who's in which camp, and start focusing on how we're going to get America patriotic again and loving each other again.
She was saying a whole bunch of everything but answering the question. And I truly believe that's a horrible characteristic to have, not only in a political realm, just like in general. Like when someone asks you something, you're doing anything but answering the question. Like it just goes to show that you're trying to avoid something, and it doesn't really rub off well to the consumer. Fourth point, she says things that she truly doesn't believe, and it shows really, 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 really bad. The fact that she's going above and beyond just to defend her statements like, oh, America isn't racist anymore, America was never racist, and whatever the case may be, but then she tries to use examples of how she went through racism. It's almost like a walking contradiction. It's like, okay, if America isn't racist, then you didn't really go through racism. Like, which one is it, Nikki? I need to stop saying like. I said like 5 times in that one sentence. It's almost, not me about to say like again. Are you saying things you truly believe, or are you just saying things because you feel like your voting base wants you to say that?
Let's talk about some of the stuff that you kind of stumbled over the last few weeks, right? Like when you say America has never been a racist country, I wonder then, what did you consider the tragic shooting of Emmanuel AME? What was that? Was that motivated by racism?
Absolutely, it was motivated. But I don't think America's a racist country. You know, I think that America, when you look at all men should be created equal, you know, given life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, we should strive to say, how do we make today better than yesterday? We are not a perfect country. We've got stains in our history that we should never repeat. But if I grew up as a brown girl in a small rural town, and my parents told me that I lived in a racist country, I would never have thought I had a chance. I want every child to know, is there racism in our country? Yes. Should we call it out every time? You bet. But you can be anything you want to be without anyone getting in your way. I just don't want kids to feel that. I want them to know they've got a chance. I want them to know they can do something. That shooting at Mother Emanuel was truly the hardest thing I've ever gone through in my life, because you had 9 amazing souls who did what so many South Carolinians do on a Wednesday night. They went to Bible study. And on that night, someone else showed up. He didn't look like them. He didn't act like them. He didn't sound like them. They didn't call the cops. They didn't throw him out. Instead, they pulled up a chair and they prayed with him for an hour. And when they bowed their heads in that last prayer, he began to shoot. These were people like Ethel Lance. She had lost her daughter 2 years prior to breast cancer. And she would go around Mother Emanuel Church, cleaning the church, singing, "One day at a time, sweet Jesus. That's all I ask of you. Give me the strength to do every day what I have to do." Tywanza Sanders, our youngest victim, had just finished college, had the world in front of him. And on that night, he stood in front of his 87-year-old great Aunt Susie and looked at the killer and said, "You don't have to do this. We mean no harm to you." Or it was people like Cynthia Hurd, whose life motto was simply to be kinder than necessary. That's who these people were. And when this happened, it brought South Carolina to her knees. And if you remember, this was on the heels of Ferguson. Every place in the country was on fire. But what we did, we didn't have riots, we had vigils. We didn't have protests, we had prayer. And we brought out the best in South Carolinians to say, it's time. And we brought that Confederate flag down. That's the way we have to go forward. I knew when I asked for the Confederate flag to come down that it was going to be an impossible feat. I had talked to legislators prior when I first became governor to see if there was any will to move that Confederate flag, because we were losing a lot of economic development. Lots of things were happening from that flag flying right in front of the State House. Republicans and Democrats, whites and blacks, told me not to touch it because of what they went through in 2000. There were, death threats, all this. It tore the state up, so they didn't want to touch it. When this happened, we needed to do something. And what brought it to light was, the national media came in and they wanted to define this. They wanted to make it about guns. They wanted to make it about racism. They wanted to make it about the death penalty.
It wasn't about racism.
It was
racist mask.
But the point was, I strong-armed them and said, there will be a time where we talk about all of that. But right now we have 9 souls we need to put to rest. I didn't have that luxury, because 2 days later, the killer came out draped in the Confederate flag. And I told my staff, I said, I want you to call 4 meetings. I said, I want you to call Democrat leadership, Republican leadership. I want you to call the congressional delegation, and I want you to call community leaders. And I said, don't tell them why I'm calling, because I knew they wouldn't show up. And in every one of those meetings, I said, at 3 o'clock today, I'm going to ask for the Confederate flag to come down. And if you will stand with me, I will forever be grateful. And if you won't, I'll never tell anyone you were in this room. And I had my husband with me that day because I didn't think anybody was going to stand with me. And at 3 o'clock, we had Democrats, we had Republicans, we had men, we had women, we had blacks, we had whites. But that was the easy part. It took 2/3 vote to get the flag down. Now, the Senate passed it quickly. And the reason they passed it quickly is because Senator Pinckney was the pastor of Mother Emanuel Church. And I'll never get over the night that I knew that happened, that I called him. And I said, Senator, I am so sorry about what happened. I will be there first thing in the morning. Whatever your families and congregation need, we will be there. It haunts me to this day that phone was ringing in his pocket. He was at Mother Emanuel, and he was killed. So the Senate passed it quickly because their brother had died. The House was a big issue. Now, in South Carolina, half the people saw the Confederate flag as heritage and tradition. The other half saw it as slavery and hate. My job wasn't to judge either side. My job was to get them to see the best in themselves and go forward. The House didn't want to budge. I told the Speaker of the House, I said, I need that flag to come down. He came back. He said, all right, I did the best I could. They'll bring the flag down, but they want to put a different type of flag up there related to the Confederacy. I said, no flag. A couple of days later, he comes back. He's like, all right, we got it. They're willing to bring the flag down. And I said, great, let's do it immediately. Let's get this done. And he said, well, there's just one little thing. He said, they want to keep the flagpole up.
For what?
Now, South Carolina politics is truly a blood sport. I knew what that meant. If they didn't bring the flagpole down as soon as the national media left, flag was going back up. I said, I want the flag down. I want the flagpole down. He said, why? You could declare a win. You could tell everybody you got the flag down. I said, because I don't want any other governor to go through what the state just had to go through. I said, get the flag. He goes, I can't do it. So I went to the Republican caucus and I said, I want to tell you a story. I said, when I was growing up, my dad would go to the big city of Columbia and sometimes I'd get to ride with him. And he loved to stop at produce stands. He liked buying directly from farmers. And I said, and one day we went to a produce stand and he was getting his things. And I saw the two people at the register and they looked alarmed. My dad wears a turban. And a couple of minutes later, 2 police cars drove up and the police officer stood next to the owners. My dad kept getting his produce. He went to the counter. He paid and he thanked them. We got in the car and my dad didn't speak to me the whole way home because he hoped I didn't notice what just happened. I knew exactly what happened. And I told the caucus, I said, when I go to get on the state plane, I sometimes have to pass that produce stand. And every time I pass that produce stand, I feel pain. I said, don't let a single child ride past our state house and see that flag and feel pain. Get the flag and get the pole down. 1 a.m. that night, they voted and we brought it down.
A question, when you look at the inequalities in America, in education, home ownership, employment and wealth, healthcare, can you admit that America is systemically and structurally a racist country?
I think culture has a lot to do with it, right? But it's more of, if you look at that, how do you fix it,
Even
right?
when you say all men are created equal, no, they weren't, because we were labeled 3/5 of a human. Black people were.
Right, and we made that wrong right. And we've got some more rights we have to do. But this
So systemically and structurally, do you think America is racist? Not the people, not everybody in America.
I don't think America's racist. I think we have racism in America,
And
I think we have cultural issues. But let me explain where I am. So first of all, I grew up, and you might have, I don't know if Berkeley County was like this, in a town of 2,500 stoplights. We were the only Indian family in that small southern town. We weren't white enough to be white. We weren't black enough to be black. They didn't know who we were, what we were, or why we were there. In that rural town, we didn't know what we didn't have. And so people just survived. I now have a education foundation in South Carolina where we do after school programs in all rural challenged areas because you've got to give extra support to those areas that don't have. But when I came into South Carolina as governor, we had thousands of people on welfare. A lot of that was generational. From one generation to the next, they just lived on welfare. It's all they knew. I wanted to change that. So what I did is I took the people on welfare and I matched them up with businesses. And I told the businesses, if you will take this person and train them, I will pay for them for X number of weeks. And then you decide if you want to hire them. We moved 35,000 people from welfare to work. We had family parties because for the first time, kids saw their parents working. It's not that those people didn't want a job. They didn't know where to get the training. You got to do the extra stuff to lift them up. Then I went into the prisons.
There was a point that was very, very interesting within the conversation where they were going back and forth about teaching racism or telling your kids about racism and telling your kids about the real world. Nikki Haley's point was that she doesn't want her kids to think, oh, just because of their skin color, they're not able to do A, B, and C, which is a good point to a certain extent. And Charlemagne and Envy was trying to tell her, but there's a sense of reality out there that you have to teach your kids. Like, you can't send them out in such a naive way, in which I agree with them as well. I don't want to speak for Nikki Haley, but it was almost as if she was trying to erase history to move on. But I think there's a mixture of both that the disconnect came in. When I have kids, I'm going to tell my kids the reality of the real world. I refuse to have kids who are walking down the street so naive. I'm going to let my kids know, like, this is a fallen world. This is a world of corruption. You're going to come across people who may not like you because you're A, B, and C. However, don't allow how someone treats you to be an indicator on your next step. That is what I'm personally going to implement in my kids. And I see what Nikki Haley was saying, but I think with Nikki Haley, she was trying to take away the reality, fulfill it with a hope and a dream that just isn't correct. And with DJ Envy and Charlemagne, they were pretty much trying to tell her, like, you can't raise your kid in a naive type of way. You got to tell them the truth. Last point. This is pretty much what I touched based on in the beginning. the questions were too easy. I truly believe they really should have held her feet to the fire for a lot of things that she said and a lot of contradictions. Charlemagne really tried. For me, when I watch these interviews with the Breakfast Club and the presidential nominees, I don't have this high expectation of them pulling all the data and doing all this and doing all that, because at the end of the day, they are representing like the average American. They only know so much, especially when it comes to the process in itself. A lot of people in the comments were saying that they should have done more research. I feel like they say that with every person they bring on, but then again, I don't know. But yeah, I do think they should have asked her more harder questions, specifically when it comes to her stances and international relationships and her role when she was the UN, and like how she would maneuver our foreign relationships right now with everything that's happening in Gaza and so forth. Like, I would have loved more of a deeper conversation when it came to that. But then again, like I said, the expectations aren't too high, because I know what I'm watching. Not in a bad way, I just know like this is not Fox News or CNN. This is everyday people wanting to know more information about a candidate. Everything that I've said about Nikki Haley has been proven in this interview. I'm not trying to boost myself, but I'm just saying, like, and the thing is with Nikki Haley, she has so much potential. I wouldn't even say so much potential, because she is a seasoned politician. It's just that like her story can be so captivating and so relatable, but I don't think she uses it for her benefit. I think it's almost like she tries to stray away from her background, or stray away from like certain cultures, or stray away from like that. Like, she just picks and chooses certain things from her background that she wants to share and use as sound bites. But I think her story is very interesting. I really do believe she can maximize her story more than what she is, but hey, it's not my business. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on post notifications so you're notified whenever I post a new video. Follow me on my social media. This is Udo at Connecting People with Policy. I love y'all all. God bless y'all. Deuces.